To what extent are community gardens inclusive in Vancouver? Community gardens have been described as being a space that exists as a result of citizens supporting them and volunteering to build them. We were interested in community gardens due to their relation with the concept of Green Vancouver and their aims of becoming the greenest city in North America by 2020. We wanted to see how the community gardens are assisting Vancouver with achieving this goal and securing food sovereignty. We were interested in investigating their inclusivity and exclusivity due to gaps we discovered in academic reading we undertook. We found from the reading gaps in how people were included in community gardens and what sort of people were involved with them, hence why we chose to research exclusivity and inclusivity in this way.
We visited 3 gardens in Kitsilano and surrounding areas. We conducted semi-structured interviews at all of the gardens. We picked semi-structured interviews as our method of interview for the purpose of allowing the interviewee to take the direction of their answer how they wanted to, rather than us directing it. The first garden we visited was Pine Street Community Garden. We had set up an interview prior to the trip with a lady who volunteered for the garden committee. The garden was open to all with a $35 membership fee for the growing season, with a 6-hour requirement to attend work parties. A work party is working on the community space of the garden rather than the individual space of a plot. The lady we were interviewing brought up the diversity of the garden frequently, with a sense of pride, and stated that the garden had around 50% of ethnically diverse populations. The garden was an open plot in the middle of a residential area with open access. We felt this made the garden more inclusive as it was easy to access. Members also came from different areas within the city, which we think made the garden more inclusive as others are only for areas surrounding the garden.
The second place we investigated was through recommendation from the first lady we interviewed. It was City Street Farmer. This was a demonstration garden with the aim to educate about composting in the city. The main point we brought from the interview is that they were willing to educate anyone that came into the garden. However, it was specified that people from the downtown east side are not actively involved with this particular garden. It is predominantly just the surrounding community that benefits from this garden, and a particular focus is made on ensuring the young, old and disabled are able to be included. It came across that this was mainly through ease of access from the downtown east side, rather than them being excluded by the garden staff.
The third garden we visited was Kitsilano Community Garden. We felt this garden was inclusive. The garden had considered accessibility for all. They had wheelchair access to the garden and raised beds for the elderly or people with back issues. They also had plots that are available for 2 people in the housing address, even if they weren't together. The plots were priced depending on the size of the plot, which made it inclusive as people with less monetary funds are still able to have a plot. The garden also had joint plots, so even with a small plot there was still plenty of gardening to do. The work party requirement for this garden was 10 hours, which is slightly more than Pine Street, but the work party creates a sense of community as it is all the gardeners working together. We think this community garden is inclusive to a greater extent, however there are still aspects of exclusivity associated with the garden.
In conclusion, and to answer our research question of to what extent are community gardens inclusive in Vancouver, we found that the community gardens that we investigated did initially come across as inclusive, all in different ways. In relation to Pine Street, City Farmer and Kitsilano, we think they are inclusive in relation to the community surrounding them through being accessible for people with disabilities, accessible for all ages and with relatively low monetary commitments. They are also inclusive through open spaces, particularly Pine Street, through not having a catchment area, the diverse range of ages and ethnicities, but not necessarily diverse backgrounds. However, to some extent, we thought that the gardens were exclusive. One reason for this was the requirement to pay for membership to have the plot within the garden. This makes the garden exclusive to a certain extent, as it makes it inaccessible to people with a less disposable income.
The gardens also don't reach out to the community, they wait for members to come to them. This consequently leads to the exclusion of the people of the downtown east side, as they don't live close to the gardens to be able to be aware of them and to try to access them. In order to help the people in the downtown east side, soul food street farms were set up. They aim to provide jobs, agricultural training and inclusion in a supportive community of farmers and food lovers. However, these gardens exclude people that are not in the downtown east side, so they are exclusive in a different way to the other community gardens that we visited, as they only help the people in severe need. Community gardens are a site to allow for a place-based community garden. We felt that the community gardens we investigated were all based around being as inclusive as they could, and with their main aim being about creating a sense of community within them.